Constructed by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1961, the Kettle Creek Reservoir in Clinton County is a popular destination for fishermen, boaters, and swimmers. Yet, beneath its peaceful waters rests the bones of long-forgotten early settlers of Leidy Township. In the summer of 1960, 15 workers were tasked with the challenge of relocating the graves from 10 cemeteries that line the banks of Kettle Creek to make way for the large 1,793-acre lake. These pioneer graveyards contained the remains of hundreds of early settlers, but by August it became clear that there was one tiny little problem. Nobody was quite sure just how many graves there really were. Workers from Walter E. Steelman and John J. Cicero Associates, the contractor in charge of reinterring remains to the North Bend and Maple Grove cemeteries outside of the reservoir zone, were startled to discover that they had dug up 33 more graves than what they had expected to find. As it turns out, numerous grave sites were either unmarked or their markers had long since been lost or destroyed. Because of the careless and hurried nature of the project, 9 of the 33 mystery graves were moved to North Bend, while 24 were moved to Maple Grove. To this day, the identities of these early settlers have never been discovered. These graves are now marked with simple metal plates bearing one single word: unknown. By the time the reservoir was created, 474 graves had been moved to North Bend and Maple Grove, although it is entirely possible, and quite probable, that dozens more had escaped detection. This was 1960, after all, and it would be decades before technologies such as ground-penetrating radar would aid in the detection of lost graves. But even if GPR technology had been available to the contractors, it is doubtful that every single grave would have been discovered. This is because pioneers had lived in the valley long before the establishment of graveyards, burying their family members on their own homesteads, in graves marked only with field stones or simple wooden slabs. Some were never even marked at all. Even with modern GPR technology, canvassing an area of 1,793 acres would be a monumental task, requiring several months and perhaps years. And yet this task was completed in scarcely more than 2 months with equipment primitive by today's standards and with a labor force of only 15 men. The first grave transfer occurred 1 year earlier, in May of 1959, with removal of graves from the Wurtzfouts Cemetery, but the bulk of the project took place between July 22nd and August 30th of 1960, with the relocation of the Sullivan, Earl Summerson, Proctor, Calhoun, Old Maple Grove, Campbell, Brooks, Botsford, and Stowe Fouts cemeteries. But there may be more than centuries-old graves beneath the waters of Kettle Creek Reservoir. History records at least one unfortunate soul whose lifeless corpse never received a proper burial, and his remains may still be at the bottom of the lake. In June of 1912, an interesting find was made by a trout fisherman named Michael Likens. While making his way from one branch of the creek to another through a marshy swale, Likens stopped in a thicket to eat his lunch. While seated on a log, his eyes fell upon an unusual artifact: an old-fashioned, smooth-bore rifle leaning against the stump of a rotted tree. He picked up the rusty rifle, and the remains of the wooden stock crumbled in his hands. When he stooped down to gather up the pieces, he discovered what remained of a human skull.
Oh my God.
Likens also found several other human bones, many of which disintegrated at his touch. It was apparent that these remains were very, very old. By the design of the rifle, Likens estimated that the gun was from the late 1880s, and he theorized that the gun had belonged to a hunter who had once rested at the very same spot. The unknown hunter must have either gotten bogged down in the swampy ground or perhaps died of natural causes. Lichens, however, made no effort to move the bones. Thousands of visitors continue to visit Kettle Creek Reservoir every year, although few of them are probably aware of what lies beneath the water. And what lies beneath the water is what makes Kettle Creek the spookiest state park in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.